One is signed, one is headed to arbitration, and one, well, we still got to find out. That's right, we're talking RFAs.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, happy Monday, Seattle hockey fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Thank you for making us a part of your daily destination, whether it's your first listen, your midday matinee, or maybe a late night just to keep you going while you're getting the work done, burning the midnight oil. Either way, we appreciate having you here. I'm Erica Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken, also an accredited media member for 2026 Milano Cortina. Before we get into the news, want to let you know today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, the first bit of news. Tye Kartye signed over the holiday weekend to a two-year contract, 1.25 million AAV starting this upcoming season. Quote, "We're happy to keep Tye within the organization for 2 more years," said Jason Botterill. Tye has worked to develop his game with us over the last few seasons, and we look forward to continuing that growth moving forward. Homegrown talent, it is something that Jason Botterill talked about during the development camp on July 1st, as a matter of fact, and he was discussing with media a little bit of the balancing act that he hopes to play when it comes to being aggressive in free agency versus, just making sure you get the right folks in the pipeline to develop them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to talk about Tye Kartye. We're going to talk about Kakko. And then I'm going to clap back at one of the comments that I got on YouTube and give you, since apparently my analysis isn't good enough, let's hear what other people have to say about a very specific signing. We'll get into that on today's episode. But Tye Kartye, a player for the Seattle Kraken that, he was a great story coming to the Seattle Kraken, and a great success story for Jessica Campbell, undrafted, in the pipeline, AHL Rookie of the Year, makes a big splash, 20 points last season, dipped down a little bit this year, and not as much of a success story for Karts this season. He played in 77 games in 23-24 NHL games, and that was 11 goals, 9 assists for the 20 points, the aforementioned 20 points, excuse me. And in 63 NHL games, he had 6 goals, 7 assists for 13 points. He did increase in penalty minutes in PIMS, 43 compared to 37 last year. Time on ice was almost 870 last season compared to not even 560 this past season. So, there definitely was a slide down in the direction the Seattle Kraken didn't want to go in. That being said, I mean, it wasn't a great season for not many people. The whole organization declined, if you will. So, Tye Kartye, I could understand. We've talked about this before. I could have understood if the Seattle Kraken wanted to move forward, maybe get in some other talent. But I also think there's value in having some homegrown talent. And I like the sandpaper. I like my sandpaper. I like the sandpaper that Tye Kartye can bring to the team. 5'11", 202. So, I think that he definitely can play bigger than his frame, and he has stood up for his teammates. So I definitely like that. But we need to see more from him. Again, he's far from the only player that we need to see more from when it comes to the Seattle Kraken team. When you look at how the Seattle Kraken are likely going to line up, Tye Kartye is looking like that fourth line player. We mentioned when there was a signing earlier with Veleno, I was like, what are we kind of doing there? But, that is a player. He played center, just Tye Kartye is a winger. But just generally, broadly speaking, I was kind of like, what are we doing? Where does everything fit here? But, Veleno has since been bought out for the Seattle Kraken. Now, Tye Kartye, I think he's going to have a really great camp. There's some AHL talent that's kind of knocking on the door, especially in a season where it continues to look to me like this is not a Seattle Kraken team that's looking to really get aggressive and be that perennial playoff team starting in 25. We just got to get ready for it. We're not looking like we're going to be that perennial playoff team in 25, 26. Laying the foundation, sure. But are we going to make a playoff run? I'm not expecting us to. I'm just going to be honest. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. I don't think we're going to be a playoff team. I think there's still some work to do. And I think that's where there were moves that were made, but they weren't like moves that were going to accelerate us much beyond, quite honestly, what the expectations should have been for last year. I don't think we met our expectations last year. My preseason predictions were that we could jockey for a playoff spot. And as the division gets better, and it has, and I've been saying this for years, everydayers and OGers know, I've been saying, how long do the Kraken have to wait just to be competitive in the division? Because we've got Team Tank in the San Jose Sharks. You've got Anaheim that's moving up. We've already saw the LA Kings have hit their stride, perhaps, and they are effectively a perennial playoff team now. They haven't gotten over the hump in the way that I think they want to, but they're in the hunt. And you can't say the same about the Seattle Kraken or the Sharks or the Anaheim Ducks. Calgary has kind of seesawed in the last season, so who knows what you're going to get from Calgary next year. But a lot of work still needs to be done. I do think, at least for now, Tye Kartye has a role. I think it's going to be on him to own this contract and earn more minutes. I mean, that's kind of literally always the thing. But my point is that he's gotten another chance, another crack at it, and he's going to have to show that in training camp, which I hope, I always hope, is going to be competitive. I'm very curious what Lane Lambert and Jason Botterill are cooking up. Botterill alluded to really wanting to make camp competitive. So I think for a player like Tye Kartye, you can't guarantee or promise anything. He is looking like, an addition or an asset, I should say, to that fourth line, but he's going to have to win and earn that spot. And then he's going to have to, if he does get through on the opening day roster, he's going to have to work to keep it. But as of right now, you got to think, with a 2-year contract, there's something that the organization sees in him. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about the Tye Kartye signing? Coming up, we're going to talk about another, it's still active RFA, and that is one Kakko, one of 11 players to decide to go towards the arbitration process. We'll break that down a little bit coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. As I mentioned at the top of the show, today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, I kind of like an afternoon game myself, golf on the green, or high stakes action. I mean, U.S. women's national team has been crushing it. Either way, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You've already been following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? Great game between the Seattle Storm and my New York Liberty. Great win for the Seattle Storm. Did you check out the odds over at FanDuel? You should have, because with FanDuel, you can get in on the action, get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburnt at the beach. I mean, ¿por qué no los dos? That's the great thing about mobile devices. Either way, I love the future bets. I love kind of seeing who the odds makers think is an underdog. And you can do all of that at FanDuel and use the knowledge that you get from our shows at Locked On Kraken, and of course, your own high IQ as a sports fan to ride with the right bet for you. So are you new to FanDuel? No worries. New FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken. And we talked about Tye Kartye. He avoided arbitration. He was able to get the contract signed. That is not the case with Kakko. A little bit more back and forth is needed in order to see if the Kraken can make a deal with the Finnish forward. I like Kakko coming back to the Seattle Kraken. I think he was good. Some people, I know we had talked about a comment where some people thought he wasn't good on that Matty Beniers line. Couldn't agree less. I really liked him with Matty Beniers. I'd like him to stay with Matty Beniers, but that means I'd like him to stay. So, I think that this is about numbers. This is probably about value. This is probably about predicting and thinking what's coming down the pike from the Kraken side. I think that the Seattle Kraken should be, at this point, it doesn't matter because it's in arbitration. But I mean, you want to be smart, sure. And I don't think you want to lose Kakko. So even though Kakko has filed for salary arbitration, the actual hearings won't start until later this month, and I believe run until August 4th or early August. Yes, August 4th, July 20th to August 4th. So there's still times for both parties to continue to go back and forth and maybe find a deal, reach a deal. Let's just go back. Arbitration. So Kakko, because he was a restricted free agent, had singular, or I should say, the Seattle Kraken had basically first dibs on being able to negotiate a contract with Kakko. He had a 1-year deal that, he worked out with the Rangers. Of course, the Seattle Kraken picked that up, and now RFA. So he immediately, as Kate Shefty wrote in the Seattle Times, immediately jumped into the top 6. I like him in our top 6 as of right now. I like his size. I like his skill set. I do think there's more in the tank for Kakko. I think even while he came to a new team, he got much more comfortable in Seattle than he seemed to be in New York towards the end of that relationship. 24 years old, so on the right side of 30 for all you ageists. I'm kind of joking, kind of. Maybe that's also because I'm definitely on the wrong side of 30. Either way, the point is he's a young guy, former 2nd overall pick. We've talked to John Schick over at the Locked On Rangers podcast. And, has he been maybe a little bit disappointing overall as a number 2 overall pick? I think that's an argument you can have for sure. The question, though, really is, can the Seattle Kraken really unlock something new and fresh? And will the change in scenery and the change in organization bode well? I think the early returns are yes. So again, even though Kakko is the one who exercised arbitration, are the Seattle Kraken willing to kind of move things along? I mean, it's a good question. It's a really good question. And I hope for the Kraken's sake, I hope the answer is yes. Because I think that there's more that he can offer. So now let's talk about what is actually going to happen from here on out. So again, they have until the 20th of this month of July to perhaps make an offer and not go into arbitration. Should they have the arbitration hearing, then what will happen is that a third party effectively will review the terms and figure out what is the right deal. So I'm just going to read this so I make it crystal clear. If the player and their team can't reach an agreement before a set date, both parties submit their cases for a certain amount of contract money. So that would go again, they submit that ahead of the hearing when they get a hearing date. A neutral arbitrator will select the final number. Salary arbitration hearings, again, will be held from July 20th to August 4th this year. Most players, though, are able to negotiate before that. I think it's worth noting, as a lot of analysts will say, sometimes this is a tactic, whether by the player, whether by the team, sometimes by both, to just kind of get the negotiations moving in a better way, pushing to provide a fairer contract before the NHL effectively, or technically the third party arbitrator, is forced to do so. Does this mean that Kakko and the Seattle Kraken are in a bad way? Well, not necessarily. Again, this is something that is done. This is the business side of the NHL. Kakko not liking the terms, perhaps the Seattle Kraken not liking the counter that Kakko's team was offering. And so this is a way to, if they can't figure something out, between the two parties, then to get someone else involved. And, I'm here for it in theory and principle. Now, when you're talking about a team that you are invested in as the host of Locked On Kraken, of course, it makes you wonder. I do think having someone like Kaapo, his size, his skill set, alongside Matty Beniers. Again, I really liked him on the line with Matty Beniers. That is going to bode well for, in my opinion, Matty Beniers. So that's huge. I think Kakko was also able to find his way with the Seattle Kraken. Now, the only other thing I'll throw in here is that we do have a new coaching staff, not a complete overhaul, but yeah, basically a complete overhaul. Jessica Campbell is the one carryover. So we have a new general manager. How is that going to work with Kaapo? And I would, if I had to guess, maybe at least some of that is the hesitancy for the Seattle Kraken to figure out if what they saw from Kakko in the short period of time that he was with the Kraken last year is replicable, or even if he can do better than that. But if I'm Kakko, I'm kind of like, hey, I didn't make those changes. Y'all did. So you saw what I can do. Now, if I'm Kakko's camp, I'm probably saying the onus is on you to replicate or improve that environment so that, again, I either can maintain, but hopefully get even better than I was for you last year, because Kakko did make a difference on a team that was dead in the water when he arrived. Dead in the water. So I don't know how it's going to turn out. I hope, I don't know, but I sure hope we get a deal with Kakko, and whether through arbitration or not, that a deal is signed and that Kakko comes back. But similarly to what we talked about with Tye Kartye, let me know in the comments. Do you agree? Should we bring Kakko back? What do you think about terms, things of that nature? And so we'll see. I think he can fit into the future of the Seattle Kraken, not just the present, but the future. I think, honestly, he kind of is a little bit better of an investment in the future than perhaps even Tye Kartye. Now that leaves, as far as RFAs, one Ryker Evans. Hasn't filed for arbitration, nor has the Seattle Kraken filed for arbitration regarding negotiations with Ryker Evans. But we also haven't heard anything regarding Ryker Evans. I also think the other day I misspoke. I don't remember if I edited it out, but I haven't talked about Mike Yzerman going to Boston. I don't think so. It's been a little bit of a weird few days, back end of June, going into early July with my move and everything. So it's very possible that I did talk about it and I just forgot. I think it's more likely though that I didn't talk about it. So no Isimon. No Isimon. And so Kakko, we're waiting on Kakko and we're waiting on Ryker Evans. I do think that we'll get a deal done with both of them. So I guess we'll see. We'll see how it all turns out. As of right now, per Puckpedia, the Seattle Kraken have 10,757,000 and some change of cap space left. So we'll see what they decide to do with this free agent window now open, but also, of course, with the RFAs. Coming up, I want to get to a comment that I will say, more so the tone was a little curt. It was a little sharp and not fully appreciated, but we can talk about what I believe to be the point. But I am also going to put this comment on blast and have also already done so in the YouTube comments because if you're going to come at me, make sure you don't miss. And I have a counter to this comment from another analyst because apparently, I don't have the qualifications to talk about ice hockey. But we'll get into that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. All right, Seattle hockey fans, we've talked about Tye Kartye returning, 2-year contract, talked about what to expect when it comes to Kakko, or at least where we're at with the process with Kakko. Hopefully we'll get updates one way or another soon. But I want to head to the comments. I love the comments. I truly do, including the comments that maybe call me out or disagree with me. I can deal with it 100%. It's the sass, though. If I'm given sass, I'm going to give it back. If I receive sass, I'm going to give it back. And this seemed to me like a sassy comment from Go Howard 6705. This was with the Ryan Lindgren episode, shocking free agent signing by the Seattle Kraken, where I argued, like many other analysts have done, is this a good signing? As you probably know, if you're an everydayer, and especially if you're an OGer, sometimes I pose questions to then break down the different angles of the argument. I don't think this is a great signing. I don't think it completely answers the questions that the Seattle Kraken have to answer. I don't think many people do. A lot of people that I have read, I talked about Darren. I've looked into what ESPN has said about this, Daily Faceoff. We'll talk about. I'm not the only one that is intrigued, is a little kind. Confused is probably closer, but maybe not extremely accurate. But apparently, the reason that I'm confused or even intrigued or somewhere in between that spectrum, according to Go Howard 6705, is because I, quote, probably haven't tried to grind 82, now 84 regular season games plus possible playoff games on an NHL hockey team. Man, Go Howard, you got me there. Yeah, I've never played in the NHL. I've never played in the NHL at all. Not even, have never attempted, didn't even dream of it, still don't. Sometimes you just need to get the guy whose presence might make your whole team better and can help create a culture. Oh man, you don't say. Building culture, huh? I wonder if only there was a host of Locked On Kraken who talked about culture specific when it came to players like Ryan Donato, Jordan Eberle, Jaden Schwartz, even Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. If only someone had done that while covering the Seattle Kraken for the aforementioned 84-game season. And if only maybe they had come on camera and done analysis 5 days a week, maybe that person, and that person obviously isn't you, but it definitely is me. Maybe that person would understand culture. And maybe that same person would also ask questions about what went wrong with the culture and why the culture presumably changed after the trade deadline. What? No, everydayers and OGers, are you listening to what I'm reading from Go Howard? Go Howard 6705 believes that for the first time ever in the comments on the Locked On Kraken page, that the Locked On Kraken show hosted by yours truly, who has never played an 84-game NHL hockey season, this comment must clearly be the first time you've ever heard on this episode anyone refer to consistently high-level hockey for 60 minutes. Because it couldn't be me, your host, begging for a consistent hockey team. Couldn't be me who's done that for the last, what are we talking about? Math is not my strong suit, Go Howard. So what is 84 times 4? That's how long I've been doing this. Anyway, Lindgren likely, likely. So this is not even, this clapback that I'm providing to you now is not even because you were giving facts. You're giving opinion. Lindgren likely helps on that front. I also have to think, okay, so again, we don't know. I also have to think Francis Botterill and Lane Lambert, who been consistently behind the bench for some time. Man, again, thank you for offering that nugget, which clearly I've never talked about before. Again, sarcasm. Have a sense of what they are trying to do and how Lindgren complements that. A lot of people do things because they think it makes logical sense. As someone who hosts a podcast and covers sports, which so I can only assume, because you don't have those credentials, that you don't know that when you work in sports media, even though we do give people like Francis, who's the president, I'm sure you know that, right? He's the president of the organization, not the general manager. So to what end this is his signing, can't really speak to that. Jason Botterill and Lane Lambert, yes, the vision, but I'm sure that you know that the vision and the culture have been teeter-totter for the Seattle Kraken. And you would definitely know that if you were an everydayer of the Seattle Kraken, of this Locked On Kraken podcast. You would definitely know that. So yeah, like the tone, bro, I'm just giving the tone that you gave back, because that's also sometimes what happens in sports media. But I just think it's really interesting that you want to clap back because I've never played an 84-game NHL hockey season, even though I have multiple credentials that make me adequately prepared to analyze things. Now, you can disagree with me, but what we are not going to do is pretend like this is an organization where everyone, including Francis Botterill, Lane Lambert, Sam Holloway, Lywicki, or anyone else in between, has acted as if everyone's on the same page. But again, we've talked about that before. But you know what? That's okay, Go Howard. I probably am going to cut out most, if not all, of this rant, because don't take my word for it. Clearly, you already aren't. But let's go to the Daily Faceoff, who's offering the worst contracts signed in the 2025 NHL free agency so far. Now, there are 5 on here, and one that almost made the cut, as in almost was in the top 5. What does Scott Maxwell of the Daily Faceoff say? Who and what is the signing that almost made it into the top 5, not just an honorable mention? The Ryan Lindgren deal. Quote, this deal barely missed the cut, with the saving grace being that it's not as expensive as some others. Now, if you wanted to make an argument with all of those words that you typed that, it's not really that much money, go for it. I've actually broken that down. Are we losing anything? I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it moves the needle in the way that it needs to, but okay, sure, that's what we want to do. But let's go on. Quote, I had identified Lindgren as a buyer beware target last week, and this deal has more than lived up to that expectation. He's a top 4 defenseman in time on ice alone, and he just hasn't played at that level for a couple of seasons now. This contract is also bad specifically for the Kraken, as he doesn't make sense for a team that probably needs to get younger. But based on their moves this summer, and this is what I want to underscore, not just for Go Howard, but for everyone else listening to Locked On Kraken, they are content on being middling for a few more years. This is a team that's not in as soon as possible, at least in how I identify it. As soon as possible, ASAP. I mean, I thought I thought everyone knew what that meant. As soon as possible. This is not as soon as possible, because we have resources and assets that we could leverage to make it truly as soon as possible. But when does as soon as possible mess up the intermediate and long-term plans? That's why, again, in this article, and I agree with this article, this is a team that's content to be building, to be, apparently we're not rebuilding, so we can't say that. This is not a retooling. I think it's a hybrid rebuild. If you don't want to say full-on rebuild, this is clearly a hybrid rebuild. This is not a team that's going to be exponentially more competitive. Let me put it this way. This is not a team that's going to be exponentially in a better position in the standings, in my analysis, than they were last season. That has a lot to do with, in my estimation, signings like Lindgren, but also the field. You can't create the Seattle Kraken and measure their success in a bubble. Sure, what you're talking about, Go Howard, as far as the compete level, as far as being a competitive team and being a consistent team, which again is all I've talked about for the last 2 years, you can talk about those things and you can be a 100% more competitive, more consistent team than you were last year and still not be a playoff team. Is that success? In some ways. Is it the ultimate success? No. How close are we to the ultimate success, which is not only to get a Stanley Cup, but to continue and maintain, again, a perennial playoff roster? All you had to say, Go Howard, is that you didn't agree, and I would have been fine. But instead, in your very so attempting to be cheeky way, you wanted to kind of throw some digs my way. So I'm just going to assume that you can also take them. So there you go. That's our episode, folks. A reminder to be kind to yourselves, which also means standing up for yourself. That is absolutely 100% a viable way to be kind to yourself. You don't have to, and you shouldn't listen to what other people say about you. You know who you are. Stand on business, as they say. You can also be kind to others. And you know what? It is not unkind to check someone. It's not. Because again, you have to be kind to yourself. And if someone wants to throw some picante spice your way, you can respectfully give it back. Hold fast, stay true, and as always, let's go Kraken. This spicy Latina with spicy hockey takes will catch you on the next episode of Locked On Kraken, and that will be after at least 2 appearances that I make on CBS Sports Network HQ. Make sure you tune in. Until then, peace out, everybody.